Those who settled Massachusetts brought witchcraft beliefs and a history of witch hunting from England. Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. Today we're examining the English witch trials and how their specific legal frameworks and methodologies shaped what would eventually unfold in Salem.
Thanks to experts like Marion Gibson, Malcolm Gaskill, Danny Buck, and Tabitha Stanmore, who've joined us on our podcast, The Thing About Witch Hunts. Have you listened to those episodes lately? We've learned that English witch trials operated under a distinct legal framework that set them apart from the rest of Europe.
England executed accused witches by hanging, not burning. Under the Witchcraft Act of 1563, the death penalty was reserved for cases where the accused had allegedly caused death through magic. But the 1604 Act under King James I fundamentally altered the legal landscape. It expanded capital offenses to include making a pact with the devil. This shift in legal theory meant that the mere act of diabolism became prosecutable as a capital crime, aligning English witch hunting more closely with the approach that had already taken hold across Europe.
One of the earliest examples of media-fueled panic occurred in St. Osyth, Essex, in 1582. Marion Gibson's research revealed how trial pamphlets functioned as both entertainment and instruction manual. The magistrate, Brian Darcy, used leading questions to extract confessions, and the subsequent pamphlet publicized these proceedings to a wider audience.
People in other villages would read these accounts and recognize similar patterns in their own communities. The specific language of accusation, the nature of familiars, the methods of harming neighbors, became standardized across regions. Print culture was creating a template for how to identify and prosecute witches.
During England's Civil War in the 1640s, the breakdown of traditional legal authority created conditions for the most intense witch hunting England would ever experience. Matthew Hopkins, who styled himself the Witchfinder General, exploited this power vacuum alongside his associate John Stern. They orchestrated a campaign across East Anglia between 1645 and 1647 that resulted in hundreds of accusations. Did you know William and Joanna Town, parents of Rebecca Nurse and Mary Esty, migrated from East Anglia in 1635?
Because torture was technically illegal in England, Hopkins employed a method called watching and walking. Suspects were kept awake for days, forced to pace their cells or sit on stools while being continuously observed. The stated purpose was to watch for demonic familiars, spirits in animal form, that would come to feed from teats on the witch's body. The actual result was sleep deprivation that induced hallucinations and extracted confessions through psychological torture. These methods were later exported to New England, directly influencing the interrogation techniques used in colonial witch trials.
Are you familiar with the official watching of accused witch Margaret Jones in Boston in 1648? That historical account sounds a lot like it was given by a sleep-deprived watcher.
Dr. Katie Ledane spoke with us in detail about the Newcastle executions. In 1649, Newcastle experienced what became the largest single mass execution for witchcraft in English history. The town corporation hired a professional witch pricker from Scotland to identify accused witches by locating the devil's mark, supposedly an area on the body insensitive to pain that wouldn't bleed when pierced.
Approximately 15 people were hanged in a single day on the town moor. Among them was Margaret Brown, who begged God for a sign of her innocence before her execution. Witnesses reported that when she was hanged, her blood sprayed across the crowd.
The witch pricker, whose identity has been lost to time, was eventually exposed. He confessed on the gallows in Scotland that he had been responsible for the deaths of over 200 women across England and Scotland, all for financial gain. The Newcastle trials exemplify how witch hunting had become professionalized with economic incentives, driving accusations and executions.
English witch trials declined in the late 17th century as judicial standards tightened. The 1735 Witchcraft Act formally decriminalized witchcraft, reframing it as fraudulent pretense rather than actual crime.
The approximately 500 people executed for witchcraft in England have never received official pardons. Organizations like Justice for Witches continue working toward a recognition of these historical injustices, but the legal status of these convictions remains unchanged. Learn more at charlottemeredith.co.uk.
The English witch trials bequeathed to colonial New England legal precedents that criminalized diabolism, interrogation methods designed to extract confessions, and a print culture that standardized accusations. When we examine Salem, we're not seeing an isolated outbreak of hysteria. We're seeing the culmination of decades of witch hunting methodology imported directly from England.
The first execution for witchcraft in the American colonies didn't happen in Salem. It happened in Hartford, Connecticut on May 26, 1647, when Alice Young was hanged. Historical research links her accusations to possibly a deadly influenza epidemic that killed many children, including children next door to her, but her own child was spared.
Let's examine the broader scope of witch trials across colonial America, spanning 50 years before Salem.
Thanks to the work of historians we've spoken with on our podcast, including Richard Ross III, Paul Moyer, and the research documented in exhibits like Witch Panic, Massachusetts Before Salem, at the Springfield Museums, we now understand that Connecticut was the deadliest colony for accused witches in the early colonial period.
Between 1647 and 1654, Connecticut tried and executed 7 people consecutively, a 100% conviction and execution rate. This period included Mary Johnson of Wethersfield, who confessed under pressure to uncleanness with men and devils, and Goodwife Bassett and Goodwife Knapp, whose trials demonstrate a larger network of suspicion spreading through the colony.
The intensity reached its peak during the Hartford Witch Panic of 1662 to 1663. While Governor John Winthrop Jr., an alchemist and moderate on witchcraft matters, was in London securing the royal charter, Deputy Governor John Mason took control. The panic began with the illness and death of an 8-year-old Elizabeth Kelly, who accused her neighbor Goody Ayres of tormenting her. The crisis escalated when a young woman named Anne Cole experienced what was interpreted as possible demonic possession. Her fits implicated Rebecca Greensmith, who confessed and implicated her own husband Nathaniel and others. Another woman who was indicted and convicted, Mary Barnes, hanged the same day, January 25th, 1663.
Connecticut established a precedent for ending witch trials. In 1669, following the conviction of Catherine Harrison in Wethersfield, Governor Winthrop and Minister Gershom Bulkley reformed the legal standard. They ruled that spectral evidence, testimony that a witch's spirit appeared to a victim, was insufficient for conviction without multiple witnesses to the same physical act. This effectively ended executions in Connecticut decades before Salem, though accusations continued as late as 1697 against even founding families like the Benhams in Wallingford.
In May 2023, the Connecticut General Assembly passed Resolution HJ 34, officially absolving all 34 individuals by name, 11 of whom were hanged, accused between 1647 and 1697.
Massachusetts experienced its own sporadic but intense episodes of witch hunting long before 1692. The Springfield Witch Panic of 1651 involved Hugh and Mary Lewis Parsons and represents the first time an entire town was consumed by terror of witchcraft. Hugh Parsons was an outsider with the temper and abrasive business dealings. His wife Mary suffered from mental illness following the loss of a child. Both were accused. Mary confessed to killing her own child and accused her husband of witchcraft. Sadly, Mary died in jail.
Between 1648 and 1688, 5 women were executed in Boston. Margaret Jones of Charlestown, a healer and midwife, became the first woman executed for witchcraft in Massachusetts Bay. Her case established the precedent for searching accused bodies for witch teats, a practice imported from English witchfinders like Matthew Hopkins. Elizabeth Kendall followed. Alice Lake confessed to seeing her dead child's ghost. Anne Hibbins was executed in 1656. She was a wealthy widow whose husband's first wife was related to a former governor. This case illustrates how even women with power and money, but sharp tongues, who lacked male protection, were left vulnerable.
New Hampshire experienced its own peculiar episodes. Eunice Cole of Hampton, known as Goody Cole, was accused of witchcraft 3 times. She was imprisoned and whipped, but never executed. Her first 2 witchcraft charges happened while Massachusetts was controlling New Hampshire, and her third happened after New Hampshire gained independence. In 1938, the town of Hampton ceremonially exonerated her, burning copies of her arrest warrants to restore her citizenship and hope to clear the air of any curses.
In 1682, New Hampshire was the site of the Lithobolia case, a stone-throwing devil incident at George Welton's tavern, which was pelted by stones believed to be thrown by demonic forces summoned by a neighbor.
The 1688 execution of Goody Glover in Boston served as a direct precursor to Salem. Glover was an Irish Catholic woman who spoke Gaelic. Her alleged bewitchment of the Goodwin children was only chronicled by Cotton Mather in Memorable Providences, a book that widely disseminated the symptoms of bewitchment: fits, biting, flying objects. No court records exist. These same symptoms would reappear 4 years later in Salem Village.
Recent work by the Massachusetts Witch Hunt Justice Project includes an effort to exonerate these pre-Salem victims. Sign the petition at change.org/witchtrials.
Tomorrow, we're looking into witch trials in other parts of the Americas.